You're listening to the Road to Wisdom podcast, weaving stories told by wonderful minds about all things motherhood, health, intimacy, politics, nature, and everything in between.
Join us on an adventure discovering unique experiences that we can learn from to enhance the ways in which we live.
We are your hosts, Chloe
and Kishia. Welcome everyone to the Road to Wisdom podcast. Today we have Kira Lee from Kira Lee Wellness joining us. I'm going to leave this introduction to you, Chloe.
Thanks, babe. No, it's really nice to have you here in person. We became little Insta friends, I think, after our chat with Jalal, and now you're here, which is really cool. And we get to talk about all the things we love and that we talk about in our DMs, which is mostly just how weird things are.
Me telling you that eating seafood is unsafe, and what are you doing?
Every time I eat always, she's like, "You're going to kill your baby." Jokes.
No, I don't actually say that.
No, she doesn't say that. She's just very sarcastic like me, and I appreciate that. But anyway, Kira, would love to hear about who you are or your background, because you were a nurse and that all came crumbling down, and now where you are now.
Perfect. Well, firstly, thanks for having me. It's so nice to actually connect with people in person. I feel like us quantum folk, we're all over the world and we're connecting through social media, which is great. Love social media for that, but coming in together in person is just something so different. So thanks for having me. But yeah, my name's Kira. I own Kira Lee Wellness, which is a health coaching business. I help clients globally achieve optimal health, whether that's fertility or hormone health, just really focusing on women, helping them achieve the best life they possibly can. And so my background, I studied a Bachelor of Psychological Science. I then went on and realised I'd like to be a nurse. So I finally found nursing. I was super excited, loving the practical component, helping people. Placements were super fun. And then I almost got to the end of that. And 2020 happened, which we all know.
Fun times.
Yeah, really super fun times for me. And that was such a hard decision because I was looking at the data surrounding the things that were happening at the time. And I was like, oh, well, a big focus of my life was having children, and I've always wanted to be a mother. And there was no data that had been done and no tests on how the vaccines were impacting fertility and women's health while they were pregnant. And so for me, it was an easy no, I'm not getting it until some data comes out or I even know what's in these vaccinations. And then there was no data. And so I refused to take that, which meant that I got pulled out of placement, fun times. And I was also working at the university as well. So I got a scholarship to study at QUT in Brisbane, which meant that I left USC on the Sunshine Coast and then moved to Brisbane to take that scholarship. And then I was also working full-time, not full-time, part-time at the university, mentoring first-year students. So I'm of Aboriginal descent. So I was really helping the Aboriginal population who came down from Northern Territory to study at QUT transition into more of a Western lifestyle, I guess, and making sure they succeed at university, which I loved so much. So I was at such this beautiful place where I had a job at the university, I was studying, I was doing placement, I really found what I was passionate about. And then I came up against this decision, which was get vaccinated or we're taking everything away from you. And mentally, that was super hard. And I think that was the hardest thing that I've ever been through in my life. Because not only did I have to stand up for myself in terms of medical sovereignty, I was completely outcasted from my friends at the university. I actually had to go to counselling. One of the teachers referred me to a counsellor who was trying to assure me that the vaccinations were safe. There was no reason that I shouldn't get it. All of my friends in my cohort were getting it. It just didn't feel right for me. So I lost my position there, and then I really had to find myself. For so long, I was the first person in my family to go to university. I was super proud. I was almost there, the full-time degree, the full-time job, the scrubs, the nursing attire. I thought it was great. I absolutely loved that. And I really had to separate myself from, you're not your career, you're not the piece of paper that you have. You are you without any of those things. And so it was really a self-healing journey that I had to go through, and realize that just because I wasn't working in a hospital, I was still worth something in society. And I guess that was the first time as well I realized that society is a construct where we're grown up as children. We grow up and we get told, go to school, get good grades, go to university, get a full-time job, get married, get kids. And that's kind of the life that's paved out for you. And it's really is such a centralized system. And if you decide that that's not for you, life is a lot harder, and you kind of have to forge your own path, which is something that I'm very thankful because high risk equals high reward. And I'm sitting here now as a business owner at 26, and I get to help women heal in, when the doctors told them that they couldn't. only just 2 years later, which is, so that's my story and a bit about me.
That is
Bravo, babe.
amazing. Oh my God. That is so amazing, because especially being a student at a university, I mean, I went to uni, and the culture in a university is so strong, and it is so hard to break free from that. So yeah, to hold strong to your own knowledge and to be like, well, provide me the studies to show that it's safe and effective, and hold to that, even with counsellors and mentors, I'm assuming, all pushing you in this direction, peer group pressure, like hats off to you, woman. I'm so impressed.
Thanks.
Yeah, that's massive.
Yeah, and especially like Brisbane, like it doesn't have the same support as here. Like I feel very lucky being in the area that I'm in and was here through COVID, because so many people felt the exact same way. And so it was like you had your peers supporting you, and you had so many people to talk to. But in the situation that you would have been in, I imagine there would have been few and far between. And if there were people thinking the same way as you, they probably weren't talking about it. So
I actually can't believe they pulled the like re-education. You know how
you hear about it, but you just like you
During
didn't think it was
COVID,
happening
one of those,
here.
like far-stretched kind of like borderline conspiracy where people were saying like they're going to start like re-education camps and all this stuff, and I was like, oh please.
Yeah.
But hearing that actually happened that's crazy.
That's wild. Kudos to you.
Thanks.
That's really impressive.
Yeah.
It was an easy decision, because for me, I feel like life perfectly times things for you. And so I actually got really sick when I moved to Brisbane. For now, I look back and I'm like, oh, of course, I was sleeping in a 19-story apartment. I had a Wi-Fi router next to my head. I was drinking tap water for the first time. My feet never touched the earth. So of course you got sick. But I was really sick. So I've always been quite academically gifted. Praise for that. I don't know about my life smarts though. Not quite there yet.
I don't know. I feel like the history you just gave us, your life smarts.
Life smarts are pretty on point.
On point. Actually, Mum is in the studio with us today. So kudos, Mum. You've
Mama.
raised an incredible daughter.
Let's hear the rest of her story first. We might take that back. Well, so is it from when you got sick then that whole discovery of kind of where you're at now took place?
Yeah, so I was always very healthy. My mum raised me on a farm, on a cattle farm. So I was always outside. My weekends I was picking beans with my parents, just always really connected to the earth, always no clothes on, running free, feet on the earth, all those types of things. So I was really thankful that I was quite healthy. My mum didn't let me get a phone till later in life. We didn't have Wi-Fi. We had one of those little sticks that you plug into your thing. We're allowed to use it for like an hour to do our homework only.
I'm trying to revert back to that. It's great. It actually doesn't even exist. I went into Telstra not long ago and I was like, can I get this? And they're like, no, that's no. And I was like, no, I want it.
Give me that.
And I also want a home phone. Anyway.
Yeah, so I guess I wasn't exposed to a lot of the toxins. We lived in Cambourian, which is just outside of Tinkham Bay between Gympie, so very rural. So I wasn't exposed to all this radiation, all this artificial lighting. We had a good circadian rhythm growing up. So I think I thank Mum for that now. Back then I was like, why didn't I get a phone? Give me Wi-Fi. But thankful now. And so when I moved to Brisbane, I think it just really impacted me, all the environmental toxins, quite a lot. And I got so sick. So I went from basically having a picture perfect memory to reading a textbook and being like, I don't know the last sentence that I just read. I can't remember. I was going to university and I was just struggling to stay awake. I never suffered with painful monthly cycles ever, to the point where looking back now, it's a little bit wrong of me to think that. But I was like, I don't know what women are on about. Like there must just be a lie, so they can eat bad food and do whatever they want. Like I don't understand. Your bleed is not painful. And then I was in fetal position crying all night, not sleeping because I was in so much pain. I would stand up and I would get chronic vertigo to the point where I would pass out on the floor.
Oh my God.
And I would just cry because I couldn't keep my house clean. I couldn't study. It was just all such a struggle. And so I was asking, I was really good friends with my teachers and lecturers at university. I was like, what can I do? These are my symptoms. How can I help myself? And they're like, oh, go vegan. And so I went vegan and, no surprise there, I actually got worse. I got better for a little bit. And I think that's because I was cutting out a lot of processed foods, 5 years at university, I wasn't taught of nutrient density. So I wasn't even aware of that then. Just calories in versus calories out, right? And so, I just got really, really sick. And just by chance, I had a follower on Instagram, Dr. Corey Garnvisi. and I put up a status and I was like, can anyone recommend a really good naturopath in Queensland, Australia? And he messaged me and said, what's wrong with you? And I gave him my symptoms and we had a call and he said, Kira, your body's not sick, but your environment is. And we had kind of followed each other for a little while, so he kind of knew what was happening in my life. And I said, what do you mean? And I kind of had a bit of an ego to me because I was that health girl, you know, that knew everything. You know, I was at university, I knew everything there was to know about health. And so I was kind of like, no, it's not. Like, what are you talking about? And so it took me a few months. We ended up talking again and he's like, just watch the sunrise. And so I was watching the sunrise. The sun rose actually right in front of my apartment. And I was watching the sunrise through the glass doors. So
it's not working.
It wasn't working. And then he goes to me, no, Kira, like you need to open the windows. And I was like, oh, okay. And I did that. And literally within 3 days, I went from not actually being able to open my eyes in the morning because my face was so swollen to waking up, having energy, not having vertigo, having an appetite back again. And I was like, wow, I don't know what this is, but I need to talk to this guy again. And he kind of just dropped me in the middle of the ocean and I had to swim by myself. So I was like searching all of his posts on Instagram. I was like, give me more information. Like, who's talking about this? I need to know. I still wasn't aware of circadian health or quantum health at this point. And so I found a book that he recommended, Going Somewhere by Dr. Andrew Marino. It's a great book for anyone who wants to read. It's about his story, advocating against power lines and how they're actually bad for our health and radiations. And he was a doctor and he went back to law school and gained a whole law degree so that he could represent himself in court. So that's how passionate this gentleman was. You know, books by Robert O'Becker, The Body Electric. And I was like, holy wow. Why is this not being spoken about in every university? I can't believe that our environment, our light, you know, we're electrical bodies. We are electrical beings. And then I started looking at my own life and I went from doing all these practices, which I wasn't intentionally doing. It's just how I live my life like a normal human being outside all the time under the sun, to then doing the complete opposite. You know, we are open thermodynamic systems. We need to get energy from our environment. We need to have that connection. We're in no way separate from. And here I am with shoes on my feet, never touching the earth, covering my eyes with sunglasses. I'm completely closing myself off from the healing powers of my environment. And so it was around this time that I started feeling better. You know, in the background of this, the whole COVID thing was happening, which was completely ruining my hormonal health. My stress was through the roof. I was like, I don't know what to do because then I don't have a job either. So if I don't get vaccinated, I don't have a job. And funnily enough, I actually did get a job after I decided not to get the vaccine, and it was making coffee for the nurses on placement, which I couldn't do, which was quite ironic. But then I lost that job as well, and I ended up doing so many other things as many women who are in my position. We laugh about the amount of random jobs that we did during that time. Yeah, well, we couldn't practice. And so I kind of had that decision there, get vaccinated and this is your life set out for you, or don't get vaccinated and you don't know what your future holds. But I was kind of feeling so much better returning to my natural environment. I was like, if this has made me feel so much better in just 3 weeks, simply just watching the sunrise, not drinking tap water, imagine what else is out there. And if this truly is out there, I need to get this out to the people, because I started looking at the statistics from the rising chronic illness from the last 150 years, and it all ties back to when we first invented the light bulb. And I was just like so passionate through healing myself. I was like, I don't care if I don't have a job. I don't care if I don't have stability or if I'm not part of the hierarchy or deemed successful from my parents for finishing my degree. I was like, this is what I have to do. And so my story really started there, and I packed up my stuff and I moved back to my hometown. My health just instantly increased, and then I started my business helping other women do the exact same thing.
Wow.
That's so amazing.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love these comeback stories, and just like highlighting how important it is to just do the uncomfortable shit, because that is where you're supposed to go, and it's really, really hard, but it ultimately is full alignment. And that's exactly like being in integrity it's the most important thing. And ultimately it always, like there's not many people we've spoken to who have been like, yeah, I took the hard road and it didn't work out. It's like they took the hard road.
We don't find these people.
We don't talk to them. And if we do get that story, we certainly don't post it.
No, but we haven't had that story. But no,
never.
My mind is just blown by just the wisdom that you've embodied in such a short time frame. Like, yeah, your age is to do all that. I mean, God, when I was 26, I was such an idiot. Like, Like, it's such a moron. And actually today, as we're talking right now, I've released my birth story. So if you want to listen to how much of a moron I was, that will give you a very clear indication. But yeah, it's incredible. Like, it's really incredible to have someone in front of us who you didn't discover this in your later years, which is when most people do. Like, you've done it early, which, just brilliant.
I think there's a lot of young people in the space as well, because I think hard times create strong people. And so the people that kind of critically were able to think about the situation and say, no, something's not right, they've really gone full steam ahead, right? Because it's, once you find this stuff, it just breeds a passion in you that can't come from anything else other than life experience. And actually going through something yourself gives you passion to want to make the change. And so we're seeing a whole field of decentralized healthcare practitioners that are just so passionate, right? And you hear these people talk. I don't know if you've ever listened to a doctor. You probably don't really see doctors much anymore. But you're just like falling asleep. You're like, oh, this is so boring. You know, you have they tell you words that you don't understand. And so us young ones in the industry of quantum and circadian healthcare, we're really breaking that barrier between the layman and the accredited, because we're breaking down these concepts and we're making it easier for everyone to understand.
Digestible.
Exactly. And it's not that hard. At university, we had a whole semester where we were literally learning new vocabulary. So we're taking words from our vocabulary and changing it to words that we didn't understand. And now I realize that that's created such a separation between doctors and patients, where the patients, they don't even want to begin to understand because they feel dumb. They're like, oh no, my doctor can handle it. He's so smart. He knows what we're talking about. But really, if you take your health back into your own hands, and, you know, quantum and circadian health empowers people to do that, you're like, oh, okay, I get it now. And so we have everyday individuals now so passionate about, tell me what melatonin is, tell me what cortisol is. I want to know how my hormones run, because they're seeking the advice of the healthcare professionals and they're not getting better. So when they're not getting better, they're like, okay, I need to do something for myself.
Yeah.
And they start researching, and then they come across just how important our environment is, right? Because Western medicine is just a prescription base. We're just
this is
handing
like
out.
the role of the OG healer. It's actually just putting the power back to the person that's kind of seeking it and being like, you actually have that. And that is incredibly empowering, as opposed to being told, okay, you need to do this. And if you don't, or here's this, we'll just cancel all of that out. And you don't even have to try. You don't have to take any responsibility. And I feel like this is what a lot of our intention is in this show, is just really being like, hey, you actually need to take responsibility for your shit. You actually are the only one that can walk this path, and you're the only one who can heal you.
But imagine,
and your body's constantly just doing that anyway.
We're gonna remove a whole industry of God complex if if you do that.
Yeah.
But like, going back to the vocabulary thing, that is so interesting, because I remember studying physio, and you could actually have conversations in front of patients, and it's like you're talking a completely different language and they don't understand you. And I, like, having been a mum of a patient and being in a hospital environment where I've had multiple doctors standing around me thinking I don't understand what they're saying, but I do, despite how terrible my vocabulary is right now. But no, and it creates a hierarchy. And I've never, until you just mentioned it now, I've never thought about that before. And wow, that is such a massive part, and like obviously ties back to how important the spoken word is, but it creates a huge barrier. It allows these people to increase their God complex by astronomical numbers. And it really does push the person who doesn't understand what's going on into a really fragile, vulnerable state, which allows that process to increase. So no, that is what we're doing on this podcast. We're bringing it back to the people. We're going to break it down into layman's terms.
Even though people get super triggered by everything we say these days.
That's usually
Not
a good
everybody,
thing.
but it's a good thing.
Yeah. And I mean, like, and I've actually spoken to, God, we're going on a little bit of a tangent. Run with us. We're going to get there, people. But I have spoken to a few people who have listened to the podcast and they've come to me and they've been like, hey, this episode triggered me. And I'm like, mate, most of our episodes trigger me, like being, look, but even sitting here with you now, like I'm a predominantly plant-based human, and the number of people we have interviewed about
hilarious.
carnivore diet.
I feel like every episode,
get
like,
ripped
vegan's
on.
the worst.
Yeah.
She's like,
I'm not actually against plant-based.
No.
Just so you know.
That's right, you can be. She's
You
used to
can
it.
be. I'm so used to it. No, but I also see the benefits of I keep an open mind, and if anything does trigger me, I can use my brain and critically think my way through and okay, this information's great. It's going to apply to someone. It's going to be fantastic. Does it apply to me right now? Maybe. Maybe there's some things I need to change. Maybe it doesn't. So but it's always awesome to have the information because then you can make informed decisions.
Informed decisions. That's another important part, right?
Yes.
And I mean, this has been happening for so long. We can talk about the German doctor who went over to Vienna to study and work in a hospital, and then he realized that a lack of hand washing was actually causing childbed fever in women. And we can talk about that story a little bit if you guys like.
I'd love to go into that. I'll
Yeah.
give it a little bit of context. So prior to coming on, Kira was actually sharing with us you've got studies to back this information. This is a story I heard, ages ago. But yeah, which basically just highlights how childbirth was a normal natural thing that occurred in most homes and we didn't move it into hospital. And then the correlation of moving childbirth into the hospital and an increase in mother mortality and child mortality rate. So anyway, Kira, take it away because you will articulate that way better than me.
Oh, we can try. I'm not feeling too fresh this morning.
We're in a sauna, people. We're in a sauna.
Yeah. So there's two points to this. One is that doctors decided that women should have pain relief. And then with the uproar of pharmaceuticals, they said, you don't have to be in pain when you're in labour anymore. Take this pharmaceutical, this anaesthesia that will help you through that pain. And so to administer that, they had to actually be inside of a hospital. So there's that component of it. So women were moved from their home or from birthing houses into the hospital. But there's also another component where there used to be birthing houses in some countries. And so the doctors, because women naturally, when they're in line with the circadian rhythm, are more likely to give birth at twilight. And so the doctors, after they finished their shift for the day, they would go to the morgue and check the autopsies, and then they would go and they would birth the children in the birthing home. And so they weren't aware of germs back then. Germs and bacteria hadn't actually been established. And so they were actually not washing their hands, and then they were giving birth or helping the women give birth to children. And they were actually inducing childbed fever, which is basically an infection of the respiratory tract, the upper respiratory tract, and the women were passing away. And that was due to the bacteria that were on their hands. I think it's streptococcus, and they were transferring that to the child when they were birthing. And so that's a big issue. And so they said, no, too many women are dying. We have to move them into the hospital. So these two things were kind of happening simultaneously. I think the pharmaceuticals came a little bit later, but that just pushed the rest of the women into the hospital. And so that really took power off women then, because they thought, we can't do a good job at birthing anymore. Something's wrong. So we have to go and seek the help of the doctors. And so there was a German doctor named Eins. I'm not going to pronounce his last name.
We'll share that.
Yeah, but he moved to Vienna to work. And so he was in a birthing home, department ward. And there was two separate wards. One was run by a team of doctors and medical students, and one was run by midwives. And so he realised that it was a 500% increase in mother deaths were happening in the ward that was run by the doctors and the team of medical students, sorry. And so he was like, why is this? Why are the midwives doing the exact same procedures, but their mortality rate is so low and it's so much higher, drastically higher in the ward that's run by the doctors and the medical students? And then he did his research and he realised that the doctors were coming straight from doing autopsies to coming into the ward and then birthing the children. And so because germs and bacteria weren't actually a thing back then, he actually thought it was the odour that was carried on the doctor's hands and their equipment that was causing the mothers to get ill. And so he decided to soak the equipment in the doctor's hands in chlorine, not because it is a disinfectant, which we now know, but because it stopped the odour. And the mortality rates just drastically decreased. And so the deaths were actually less than the maternity ward at this point. And he thought that was great. He was telling all the other hospitals, this is what I found. Isn't this amazing? And I think that this is a really good story that kind of gives people insight to centralised systems and how they can go wrong if the wrong people are governing the system at the top of the hierarchy. And so the doctors didn't really like this. No surprise that this new guy was coming in and telling them that they were causing women's deaths.
I think just to add into the story, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I do remember hearing that it was like a show of how good a doctor you were, the amount of blood staining your apron and like, yeah, the amount of grit you had on you, because it was like, this is how many patients I've seen or this is how many autopsies I've produced. So they didn't wash, they didn't change their attire, because that, like when people saw that, it was like a mark of, oh, that's a really good doctor. So yeah, interesting times back then. I think that was in the day of lobotomies too, which is a whole nother.
Yeah, well, Ines actually ended up, the doctors put him in a mental asylum because they said he was insane. And then 200 years later, hand washing became the talk of the town, and bacteria and germs were found, and that was that. But this gentleman literally spent his whole life researching, implementing, and he didn't stop when the doctors said, no, you're wrong, and they went back to the old ways and mortality rates went up. He continued to spread his message because he was so passionate about it. And then they deemed him insane and put him into a mental institution, which is really sad. But and it's important that we actually tell these stories because they're real people. They're their actual stories. They spent their lives advocating against the system. And unfortunately, they didn't win.
And that's still happening now on so many different scales and in so many different little pockets of what health is. And
I think there's so many of us insane people, though they don't have enough asylums for us.
It's true. But I guess like because we're talking about birth and we're talking about that, I would love to hear about your kind of scope on kind of where women are going wrong and some of the things that we're doing, or just what modern life is, how it's restricting us and making, because this morning I just read that like 20% of the entire population globally is infertile. And I was like, well, almost 20, sorry. It's like 17%. But I was like, yeah, no. And interestingly, I read that it was like the 80s where there was like an increase, but they're like, we don't know why. Obviously there's many reasons why. But yeah, it's crazy to think that we are so infertile suddenly, and that's going to just keep on increasing until, what was the year that apparently we're going to be like
20, I think it's 2045 that like sperm counts will be like zero. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd love to hear your perspective on that.
Damn, unless you work with me and then you're sperm.
Well, that's the other thing, because we were just talking about how that thing that I mentioned is currently being blamed for male infertility.
Oh, yeah, because sweating's so unnatural and it's definitely going to make you infertile and doesn't make you healthier.
Right now we are super fertile then. Sorry, super infertile.
Yeah. Oh,
we're super sweaty.
Yeah, but we can totally talk about that.
Yeah.
So I think because I love to keep things super simple for laymen to understand. Not even laymen, just normal people. We're just normal people.
Just pregnant people with not many.
Yeah.
There's no hierarchies. We're just all people just trying to find out what's best for our health. And so it really is, and that's why I kind of pressed on that so much. It's a separation between us and our knowledge of health. You know, health used to be something that women in the home looked after, and then our power was given to doctors and medical professionals. And it all started back in the story of Ines beforehand, when I told you this was 1849 when that story happened and went down. And so when women were moved into the hospitals, the doctors, who were predominantly male back then because women weren't allowed to be doctors, they were allowed to be nurses, they made the decisions of how women were to birth. They were to birth on their back because it was easier access for the doctor. And then we had pharmaceuticals come into the picture because they couldn't be too loud, they couldn't be in pain. All these processes that were normally quite natural and we'd done for hundreds of thousands of years with no complications. But I guess I need to really give an intro to circadian health here before I kind of go down this rabbit hole for anyone who hasn't heard. But this is the cutting edge of science and the medical industry that's happening right now. And a lot of things are going to change in the medical industry with the light of circadian health and quantum health, which is really exciting. But we've been told for the longest time that we are separate from our environment. And we're built on this Western allopathic model that if something goes wrong in our body, we need to put something in. So our body's not good enough. It can't do what it's designed to do. So here's a supplement or a product that can fix you. And that's charged to our pocket or the public by subsidies and our tax. And so we've kind of been engraved since we were younger, especially my generation as a 26-year-old, the marketing really came around then, you know, from our hair color to our breast size. You know, there's a product, there's a procedure, there's a pharmaceutical that can fix us because we're broken. And so there's kind of that notion happening in the background, which has really shaped the way that our brains have developed and how we view ourselves in the world. At this same time, we have our environments drastically changing. We invented the light bulb 160, 70 years ago, which for the first time we were able to light up our night, when nature actually says, no, there's no light after sunset except for a fire, which is infrared light, right? And so our environment's drastically changing. We're going through this technology boom. We have all this radiation from devices. We're constantly on our phones all the time, exposing ourselves to artificial light. And you'll see why that's important in a moment. So we're told that our body, if it's broken, needs something put into it. But what if it didn't? What if our body was just in the wrong environment? What if it was never us and it was actually our environment the whole entire time? And so the notion is that from sunrise to sunset, there's light in our environment from the sun, and we don't see, rays of all different frequencies like blue, yellow, green, infrared, UV coming from the sun. We just see illumination. But it truly is this blend of frequencies that are changing all throughout the day. So in the morning before sunrise, the sun is really high in infrared. Then we have that blue light come in, and then that blue light disappears at sunset. And then that's actually how our body senses time, is through the blue light in our environment. And so we have a circadian rhythm, which governs every single process inside of our entire body, from our hormones to cell repair, mitophagy. It impacts our meridians, proton flow, our fertility. Basically, our quantum clock inside of us that even tells us where we are on the planet, what season it is, and how old we are, is all dictated by the light in our environment, because our body reads these light signals that change from season to season, from day to day, from year to year, from the sun, and it actually uses that as information to then run its internal circadian rhythm and what's happening inside of itself, dependent on the light that it's around and the time of day. So in the morning, when we get that specific blend of frequencies, it tells our thyroid, hey, Kira's body, it's morning, it's time to rev up her thyroid hormone, it's time to start her hormone production. It's also this time of the month for her, so she's going to be fertile today. And then our body can read that information and say, okay, that's exactly what I'm going to do. Except for when we don't have the proper environment, this process doesn't happen. So these internal rhythms start to break down. And it's not just the sleep-wake cycle. We talk a lot about cortisol being the hormone of the day and melatonin being the hormone of the night. And melatonin doesn't just make us sleepy, it also governs cell repair. So if we don't have enough melatonin in our system, our cells aren't going to repair. We're not going to go through autophagy, mitophagy, all these processes that basically just kick out dead cells before they have a chance to replicate into tumors and cancers and things that we don't want. And this is, this doesn't just impact tumors and cancer. It's also things like even dandruff, even eczema, skin conditions. And so then you're probably like, Kira, what does this melatonin have to do with our light environment? And turns out blue light at nighttime increases our cortisol. It clips a hormone called ACTH, upregulates our cortisol, blood glucose levels, and insulin. And at the same time, it suppresses melatonin. So you can think of melatonin and cortisol as opposite ends of the seesaw. So every time that cortisol is raised, melatonin is non-existent, and vice versa, right? So if our cortisol is raised at nighttime, we don't have melatonin, which means we're not going to feel sleepy and we're not going to go through cell repair like we're meant to every single night when we sleep, which is increasing our inflammation across the board, and then also decreasing our cell repair that we're going through, putting us at greater risk of all illness and disease, especially hormonal-based cancers, because blue light at night also turns on our hormone axis. But unlike natural sunlight, which also turns it off at the right timing when that neck frequency comes in, it doesn't. So all night long, we're just creating hormones, influencing. I can see your face. And you wonder why this isn't mainstream yet.
I know. Yeah. Well, look, being someone who has gone through or walked a loved one through cancer, like I just think about, I just get transported back to that moment where we're in hospital under blue lights 24/7. Like it's never dark in there. It's constantly beeping. You're surrounded by Wi-Fi. Like it's just relentless on the body. And
they're never sleeping.
And this is where we're putting our people
that
who
are most
are
vulnerable.
sick. So yeah, and I mean, look at it from a birthing standpoint as well. It's just, I'm getting fired up.
Yeah, and I mean, I held my granddad's hand just before he passed away of cancer in hospital in 2016, and I wish that I knew then what I know now, but I didn't. And so you just have to accept that and just know that it's okay. There's nothing you could have done, and for that, if that didn't happen, maybe you wouldn't be here now, and you wouldn't be as passionate as you are about this topic because you don't have personal experience, right? So the invention of the light bulb basically is when chronic disease started to go through the roof. And it's not, hospitals used to be a place if you broke your arm or you broke your leg or something happened to you on the farm or whatever, right? It's an acute injury. Whereas now it's not that. 99% of all admissions are cardiac. They're organ-based. And so it's chronic diseases that never really were heard of. You know, breast cancer wasn't actually written in the medical Western literature at all until after 1900. Like at all. It was unheard of. Now, all of a sudden, we're changing our light environment, and my generation, 1 in 3 women are going to get a diagnosis of breast cancer in their lifetime. Not if I can help it, but at the moment, that's the statistics. And I think that's actually very kind to say. A lot of women actually have cancer right now, and we just don't know. I actually believe that cancer is something that can come and go. But if you're unwell and you have systemic inflammation for a long time, you're in the poor environment for a long extended time, that's when it really starts to show face, right? Because the notion is that our body is broken and we need to put something in to fix it. But our body knows exactly what to do. We're not born into a world that was designed to make us sick. Our body's not designed to make us sick. Our body can do exactly what it was supposed to do if it's given an environment that's supportive of its function. And now we're surrounded by all this artificial light, screwing up our hormones. We're around radiation from our cell phones, from Wi-Fi. You know, you can't really drive through. You can't even drive through. When I was driving here from Queensland to New South Wales, there was just so much artificial light, cell towers everywhere, you know. And then we're seeing at the same time a rise of childhood illness as well. And we've just accepted that as a species. We're like, oh yeah, children are just sick now. Autism, 1 in 2 children in 2030. I have a client who at 2 years old, she had a benign tumour. Thank God it was benign. Removed 1.5 kilos along with her left kidney. And the doctor said, oh yeah, that's normal. We're seeing that a lot these days. And then the treatment for that is undergoing radiation. Now, lucky, this patient of mine is actually blocking blue light, so they can go through the cell repair cycles to undo the damage from that radiation. But imagine a child that's not doing that and they don't have any melatonin and they're not repairing the damage done from that radiation, because that's actually fact. Radiation causes cell damage and mutation. So if you can't take out those bad cells, of course your cancer is going to be reoccurring because you can't actually heal from the damage from the cancer or the radiation. And so we've just kind of thrown our hands up in the air and said, oh, we don't know why children are getting sick. Even if you want to blame it on the processed food, even if you want to blame it on environmental toxins and air pollution, that's fine. But we're not even doing anything to decrease that in our environment as it is. And so it's just increasing our toxic load. And then you throw in blue light, we can't detox, we can't get rid of those toxins. It's just a recipe for disaster. And then you sit back, as you said before, and you look at the public healthcare industry, because it's an industry, and these people are sick, and then they're going into hospitals.
No, they're not getting better.
They're not getting better. You know, people are going in for, and I have a lot of experience in this. I had a client in the hospital recently, and my lovely old lady there, and she went in for a simple procedure at 75 years old. And then all of a sudden she's suffering with organ failure because she's so dehydrated, because she's been given so many pharmaceuticals and she has no one to advocate her. She's being fed fluorinated water, heavy in neurotoxins. They're not getting good nutrition. It's also microwaved, which just decreases the water count as it is. Pharmaceuticals that cause dehydration, blue light, being woken up every 2 hours. So they're not, even if they weren't under blue light, if you're woken up every 2 hours, you're not going to have a good circadian rhythm and you're not going to cell repair. And then we're wondering why no one gets better in hospitals. It's just so...
But they do their best.
Because she is as sarcastic as us.
It's actually...
It's frustrating
depressing.
because it's so simple, right?
Yeah.
It could be so simple. It could be transformative. It could be just so different. Like the outcomes we could achieve are just insane to think. And yet here we are.
I think something that is actually a silver lining here is that when we look at, so obviously by the time you get into a hospital, your toxic load has been that excessive that we're seeing some really major stuff happening. But when we look at things like infertility, and I would argue that it's not infertility unless there's nothing's helping you to get
you've had a full
pregnant.
There's no possible way that it can get.
Yeah, like
not including like tubular blockages like endometriosis and things like that. Like actually severed cut, you cannot. Nothing can get through.
Hysterectomies. I would argue that is true in fertility. But when we're not falling pregnant and we are trying, that there's a really good first indicator. That's like, you know, one of those really beautiful things. Like, okay, that's something that I need to change. So my environment's off, my toxic load's too high, whatever that is, and you can make those changes. And I mean, you can probably speak to this with your clientele, Kira, but you would then see someone become fertile. And you can tell, like, you know, you've got cause and effect, which is really nice.
And it's like the system would treat that infertility as, okay, your body's broken and here's something that can fix you. It's $25,000, it's IVF, and we're not actually going to guarantee you anything after that. Side note, I was doing some research the other day, infertility centres. So the problem is a lot of pharmaceuticals fund all the studies that get done because they need evidence to back up the publication of their pharmaceutical, right? And so when it comes to telling people to go out in nature and regulate the light environment, it's not very profitable and you can't productize that. And so this area of research doesn't get a lot of funding. But there's some really interesting funding being actually supported by IVF centres because they're finding that if they use red light during implantation of the sperm and the ovum, the success rate is actually 90% better than if they were to do it under blue light. But yet we're still saying, no, blue light's not bad for your health.
Oh, shit.
And I'm
All
like,
I got from that is try having sex outside
Or by the fire.
by the fire at night.
Oh, mate, that's
hot.
actually one of my conception stories. Anyway,
lovely.
There you go.
isn't it?
There you go.
I know,
Proof
right?
is in the pudding.
There you go.
Yeah, it's crazy. There's
But
no
that's
way.
just so crazy
Yeah.
to think about. And then in terms of fertility health, I find massive improvements with women. Light is something they don't even think about. They think of what can I put into my body to make it better?
What should I eat?
Prenatal,
What
should I
supplements should I
eat?
take? Yeah.
Exactly. And they don't think, oh, maybe it's my environment because they don't understand that hormones, like what actually are hormones, they're quantum clocks, they're quantized. They communicate, they interact with the light in our environment. They tell our body how to run, what cycle you're in. They also regulate cell turnover. So if you have endometriosis, you have a problem with your light environment. If you have POX, you have a problem with your light environment. Your body is confused. Your brain and the rest of your body are not functioning. They're not on the same timeline. And you get this disconnect. And then that's what actually is the root cause of this problem, along with glyphosate and a few other things. But so women need to really understand that their hormones are directly tied to their light environment. And so when you wake up and you get out into the sun, it tells your body to start making your hormones. And so pregnenolone, which is our master sex hormone, steroid hormone, they're synonymous, is actually made in our mitochondria. So one, you need to have healthy mitochondria, which becomes dysregulated in poor light environment and when you're under radiation from Wi-Fi and things like this. And then you need to have the proper light signal to tell your mitochondria, hey, you need to break pregnenolone. And then the next light signal that actually divvies up that pregnenolone to become all of your other fertility hormones that you need, including progesterone. And so a massive influx of clients that I'm having are women that can conceive, but then they miscarry because an allopathic medicine and even naturopaths tell them their progesterone levels are too weak. And progesterone actually governs the thickening of the uterine lining, which is really important for implantation. So if you don't have enough progesterone, your uterine lining's not thick enough, and then you're going to miscarry because the sperm can't actually attach to the uterine wall. And so they're given all these supplements, and it doesn't actually, sometimes it works, it's not optimal, sometimes it doesn't. But if you get these women into the proper light environment, into the right signaling from the sun, that actually naturally increases their progesterone to term, they don't need to outsource. And that's just such a simple fix, right? But it's not profitable, so it's not spoken about.
Well, this breaks my heart because a lot of the time we'll get people say, I tried everything. I took every supplement. I saw so many naturopaths. I saw so
I
many
spent thousands of
fertility-
dollars.
I've spent
Acupuncture.
every single. I've
One
tried it
time.
all, and it actually, as much as that frustrates the shit out of me, because I'm like, you actually probably haven't tried everything.
Yeah.
Because it's way too simple. The thing that you're missing is actually like the root fundamental here, but no one tells them about that probably. And I'm going to say, give them a little bit of credit. These people, the specialists, have no fucking idea that this is a thing. And so, yeah, it's something that, of course, people are like, well, I had to do ART, or I had to use a surrogate, or I had to do something because I tried everything. I'm one of those people who just couldn't get pregnant. But this is like,
I feel like there's a really beautiful story that's been going around social media recently of an influencer who has been struggling with her fertility, and it was like they live a fairly predominant nightlife under strobes, etc., and a lot of traveling. And it was when they shut down from that and they went on a holiday and they were removed from that environment, she felt pregnant. And after
years of ART,
it's been a heartbreaking journey for them, and now she's pregnant, and you're like,
1 + 1 = 2.
yeah,
but it's
and it articulates it. It's like it's just so perfect.
Yeah, it's these real life stories that need to be told. That's going to make people listen, because they're not going to hear it from their doctors. They need to hear it from real life people.
Unfortunately, yeah, these
still very much thanks the surgeries and the treatments and
everything's helped. And there's no realization. Like there's a little bit of it's because we slowed down, but there's no real link there to we were in nature, like our bodies were working with nature. We weren't in these artificial environments. Like that was not considered at all.
Yeah.
But when you look at it from our perspective, you can see that is exactly what's happened. So,
and then the diet, comes into it as well, with leptin sensitivity and leptin resistance. And I know that you guys know a lot about leptin, and
especially because
we hear a lot about leptin.
Yeah.
But women who are leptin resistant, they have such a hard time conceiving, and then you reverse that, and then all of a sudden they're pregnant. It's getting to the point now where I have to tell clients, hey, try not to conceive, because you get to a point 3-4 months in and they can conceive, but you're like, we still have work to do on your mitochondria for actually optimizing your fertility and ensuring your child is of optimal health, right? Because we inherit all our mitochondria from our mom, and I don't know if I want to say this on it.
No, go for it.
Go for it.
But in my field, autism and spectrum disorders are actually all tied to something called mitochondrial percent heteroplasmy. So basically, if you have crappy mitochondria, you're more likely to get autism, ADHD symptoms, all these things. And they're directly passed down from mums, which comes from a poor light environment, radiation, circadian mismatch, traveling lots. Even simple things as, hey, my heritage is from Europe and now I'm living in Australia. That can actually also be a negative influence around mitochondrial health. And I'm like, okay, so when we get your light environment right, we reverse your leptin resistance, then you can conceive. But I'm like, this is happening a bit too quick now. I think that we should wait a little bit to really optimize that mitochondrial function to then ensure the quality of outcome, which is a hard thing, right? Because if they can conceive, they want to. But you're like, hang on, like there might be a little bit of extra work being done, right? But it's all going back. We can talk about the science all day, but really we just have to think of, okay, so my infertility is not my body being broken. It's my body actually doing something amazing for me. It's saying, okay, something's not right. You need to do something, just like you said. Is it the diet? Is it the light? Is it in the inflammation? Is it your stress? Is it trauma? Because that all has an impact as well. You need to deal with that so that you can have the healthiest, happiest child as you possibly can. And so instead of forcing ourselves, like force starting through IVF and surrogacy, we need to really look at our mental health, our physical health, and look, are we eating the right foods? Are we as healthy as we can be? Do we suffer with things like vertigo, insomnia? Do we have headaches? Are we not feeling well ourselves? Because if we're not feeling well, how are we going to nourish a whole nother life inside of us? And so that really, you shouldn't have to wait. I think in 2023, unfortunately, looking at the bigger picture, which I think you girls can, it's like, it's not just about conceiving, it's about optimizing your body for fertility. It's like, I want my body to be as optimal as it possibly can, so my offspring has the best head start in life. We always think, do we have enough money? Is my child going to be, have enough land? Is they going to have...
Do we have the house?
Do we have the house?
Cars?
Do we have the cars?
Yeah.
Do we have the top quality child clothes? Can we afford this? But no one actually thinks about giving their child a head start in life through its health. And that really comes from, and it kind of is unfair because men have less of an impact on childhood outcomes than women do because we give them our mitochondria. Are we as optimal as we possibly can be? And then, no, we're not. In 2023, nobody is as optimal as we were 100 years ago.
2024 now, babe.
2024. Where does time go?
But it's also like the continuum, right, for our children is because like we just spoke before about that daunting statistic of, fertility rates being 0. And by the time our kids are at the point of age where they are probably thinking about conceiving, it's so important to download these values to our children, because like the world is not getting any less technological. It's not getting any less hustle culture. It's not getting any easier to afford to maintain this type of lifestyle that most people are living. And so I can't imagine by 2045 when our kids are conceived, I don't actually know how old they're going to be. They're going to be quite old. They're like 30, right? It's going to be a hell of a lot harder if we continue on this path that most people are living, versus us as mothers taking full ownership of this. I mean, like, this is how it's done. This is what's actually important. This is how we're going to do it. And this is how you're going to do it.
And taking our power back and being like, no, our body isn't broken. You know, our hair's perfectly fine the way it is. We don't need toxic bleach in it. Like our skin, we just need to get in the sun. We don't need fake tan. You know, we don't need anything. We need to take our own power back, stand in our power and be like, no, I know exactly how to heal my body.
Yeah.
I need to give it the right environment. And then when you come back to the right environment as well, you're able to think in ways you never thought before. Things that used to matter to you don't matter anymore. Your whole life changes. You know, technology doesn't just influence our physical health, it also influences our mental health.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'd love to just, before we move on too far, also point out that like fertility as a health it's an indicator of health is so important. Like we find it so important because, I mean, while neither of us have personally struggled with fertility, or, I mean, you definitely not. I have to, but
It's that childhood farm life.
I agree with you.
but it's like, but looking at just keeping the health of our children, whether they want to procreate or not, you want them to be as fertile as possible because it's an indication of
Health.
of perfect health. Yeah, and not like you're infertile and it's just unlucky. It's like we're looking at our children and our children's children, and it is purely an indicator of where health should be.
Society.
Yeah, like if you're not there, well, you know, there's things to change. So because we do get a little bit of backlash talking about infertility
that's okay.
here.
When we can elaborate on that a little bit too. I mean, the thing is we're getting sicker and sicker, and so we can't rely on Western medicine anymore. Something's wrong and we need intervention now. And so everything that I've talked about today, there are studies, and I'm sure we can link them in the show notes. There's actually countless studies. I was very overwhelmed. I was like, wow, why wasn't I shown this in university? Only the ones that they wanted me to see. But even if, you know, there's no funding. So if they do a study and they're like, yep, artificial light at night causes hormone-based cancer, or poor mitochondrial health influences spectral disorders in all children, don't you think that study is worth investing in as a collective? Don't we want to know, okay, is this real or is this fake? And so we should be investing our tax money. We should be doing everything we possibly can for our children, just like you're saying, in our future generations. Is this something that is harming our health? And I'm okay with that. If it turns out that it's all wrong, well, then that's great, because it means that it is a diet and exercise or whatever else it could be, right? But at least then we know and we can tick that off. So I really urge people to really look at this with an open mind and be like, I do want the best for my children. I'm willing to let my ego settle. This is something that's new. It's something that I haven't heard about before. And I need to research this and form my own conclusion. And don't just listen to me. I don't want you to listen to me. I don't want you to just listen to your doctor. I want you to be empowered and say, okay, I'm going to do the research. I'm going to talk to doctors. I'm going to talk to people. I'm going to ask the right questions to get to the bottom of this, because I care about my children and I care about my health.
And
Even if that's to say
I think this also extends to, because I just want to point out that quantum circadian, like this what we're talking about is so much higher and beyond your naturopath, your nutritionist, your dietitian, your natural health practitioner, like whatever you're calling yourself, it is so much more than that. Like I've studied naturopathy, so I know that it's very much, here's a thing to help you and this will save you, as opposed to like what we're talking about. So I feel like for those people who are constantly like, I've spent thousands on protocols, I've seen a naturopath and it doesn't work, so it has to be something else. This is not that. It is beyond that. It is, I just wanted to point that out, because I feel like people get so hooked on believing in the stories that they tell themselves about trying everything, and this is just not it.
And they all, like, you know, everyone has their favorite naturopath or they have their favorite alternative doctor. And I'm not running them down at all. They still have their place, but we've just forgotten the fundamentals of what it means to be literally human, like live like a human. And as I said before, it is these real life stories that need to get out there. I know there's a Quantum Health Summit happening in Kin in March. I think it's the 25th and 6th, where a heap of doctors and myself will be talking at, giving presentations about quantum and circadian health, so that this can get out to the general public without having to need a doctor's approval to get it out there. And when we have people with real life stories talking, I mean, I was fortunate enough, actually, my first ever fertility client from my hometown, which, let me tell you, just like I was telling you that podcasts in person are the best, so is working with clients in real person, because it's not just a statistic you've read on social media. It's not just someone's tweet saying circadian health's cool. It's like an actual person who's tried everything, 7.5 years of infertility. Their doctor said, you have nothing, start saving for IVF. 4 months into just regulating their light environment, getting their bare feet on the ground, reversing their leptin resistance, is pregnant. And that change in their persona, the confidence that they get from that, right?
Because it's changes.
Imagine if I was told, I've thought about this, and if I was told you are not fertile, your body's broken, I would just feel so destroyed. I would feel so upset, because there's nothing that, and I know I'm not speaking on behalf of every woman, but women, they, it's our God-given right is to conceive. That's what we're designed to do. And having that taken away from you, and then realizing that it was never you and it was your environment, and taking that power back. Not only being able to conceive, but now your whole family's health is just something that you never ever thought possible. They're so healthy. Is just seeing that in real life. There's just something about it. It's just that in-person connection, real people. And it is real people, walk through a hospital and tell me that they're not real people. They're not a statistic on Twitter. They're not something that a doctor's posted about. They're not something the news can do an article on. Each person is real. They have their families. They have their values. They have their story. And they deserve to hear these messages because it's so simple.
I feel like the future of decentralized health is just one that is so exciting. I know you talk about it all the time, but it is.
It's becoming more centralized, actually. I'm going to a conference in El Salvador on the 16th of March. I'm very excited for what's being announced there. But there are some good people that don't get along with everyone, but they're doing big things in terms of changing the world, so that we can say, no, I don't want to get vaccinated, or no, I don't want that for my children. And you can actually say that. At the moment in Perth, I have a client, they actually can't opt out of radiation. They actually, well, not themselves, they can't opt their child out of the radiation treatment after cancer, because that's child abuse and neglect.
So
they have no choice.
Terrifying. That is one of, after we did our cancer journey, that was one of the things that I think haunts me at night. And one of the reasons that sent me on such a health bender afterwards, because I'm like, in this system, if your child has cancer in Australia, you have to take them to a doctor, or if they get a diagnosis, you have to, at that stage, go through the process. Everything the doctors say. If you don't, it's
watch how quick I get on a plane to Mexico. That's all I can say. It's terrifying.
It's really scary.
Bring on decentralized everything.
Because
absolutely.
we shouldn't have to. We should have, even if, the thing is, we're born with free will. That's the one thing we will always have. Well, we still have free will. It might be hard to make the lesser decision, but you can make it. And if we make the wrong decision and we die, well, then that's up to us, isn't it? That should be our right. It shouldn't be up to one centralized industry telling us what's best for our health or what we should do, especially in a world where everyone's getting sicker.
It's not like we're getting better. No one's getting healthier. No one's getting happier. No one's getting helped more. It's completely opposite.
And it's what do you have to lose? I always tell people, just try it for 3 months, and if you don't like it, you can have 100% of your money back. And that offer's never been taken up yet. Touch wood. Because it's free, right? They don't try crazy until they have no other option left, and then turns out crazy works. But decentralization definitely is the way forward. It's giving the power back to their people, even if that's to their own demise. I believe that's the way that it should be. That's how we learn. And, if nothing's working, well, then we need to try a different route. Maybe we've made some mistakes and now we're ended up somewhere where we shouldn't be. And we need to say, okay, let's go back. What did we get wrong? Revisit, all the things we thought were foundational in science, and perhaps they're not. Nutrition studies, they're done, studies on cells, they're done where all the water's actually taken out of that cell, and then they're studied under the microscopes and through the technology, when we actually found out that water's the most important part. Water and the light that the water interacts with completely change how that cells function. and yet we're just taking it out because water's nothing and it's not important.
Mm.
And so nutrition studies are not accurate. And that goes for other industries too.
I feel like it's always, my thought is always that removing all the science, not 100% necessary, obviously, but if we just unplugged ourselves completely from the matrix of whatever it is that we are connected to, and just like take some time to observe like how things work out there, it's no different to what we need to be doing. And I just think it's so simple. And we always talk about this, like it's so simple. And I think that's why it seems so impossible, because we've been conditioned for so long to think that healing, health, transforming, evolutions are just so big and we need something to be able to do that, but we actually don't.
Our body is designed to heal and to function. We just need to give it a good environment. And like, you even look outside. Do monkeys take fertility pills? No, they just give birth because that's what they're designed to do. That's their innate capacity. And even looking at zoos, you know, the health of the animals in there, they get cancer, they get sleep disorders, they get all these things wrong with them. And it's because they're in a zoo. Animals in nature, they don't get that. You know, when they're not around light pollution, when they're not living in a modernized society, eating modernized food.
I think about that with even domesticated animals like dogs and cats. Like since when do dogs get like terminally ill and need?
Yeah. Well, we actually, the way I was taught to practice from my mentor was that we also look at the health of the animals in the home because they have a shorter lifespan. So if they're suffering of blindness or cataracts, or they have cancer, that's actually a tell sign that that's the same environment that their owner is in, and that's what they're looking at getting just a little bit further down the track.
Wow.
Oh, interesting.
Very interesting.
Well, Kira, thank you so much for coming in today. This has been an amazing
This could have
chat.
been an easy 2-3 hour chat.
Yeah. Just keep going.
I hope it's been okay. I feel like I've rambled so much
No.
about random things.
You're
No,
actually incredible.
Yeah, and
I just could like hang off you all day. I'm like, oh God.
just keep talking.
Keep talking.
Feed us information.
I just feel like it's important to just be a normal person and just speak in layman's terms and just give people the big picture. You know, we don't need to make it complicated. We just need to speak from our heart and just get this message out there to everyone that's listening.
Beautiful. So
You're
if our listeners want to find more and follow you, I think by the time this comes out, you would have been in El Salvador already.
Yeah.
And you'll be fully booked like 2 years in advance.
Yeah.
So don't bother.
It's getting a little bit crazy now. I actually hired a receptionist last week.
Hey, good for
Congrats.
you.
Thanks.
But yeah, if our listeners want to find you and connect, where can they find you?
Yeah, they can find me on Instagram at Kira Lee Wellness.
Yep.
Also on Twitter, not very much, trying to get more on Twitter, but it's just such a scary space out there. But yeah, Instagram's the best place. I also have a little podcast, which is relaunching next month. So
And what's that called?
The Health Standard.
So good.
Perfect. Yeah. Well,
Amazing. Thank you so much.
No, that's okay. Thank you for
Love
having
being
me.
in this same little space with you and sharing all this beautiful information.
I feel like there's going to be a part 2 and part 3 when our brains function a little better.
Post-birth, postpartum, if that ever happens. Because it's been like that for like 8 years for me.
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
postpartum for a long time now. So
Yeah.
But
Maybe
now
one
with
day.
quantum and circadian health, maybe it just won't.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, when my kids stop turning on all the lights and waking up through the night,
Don't put
maybe
lights in
we
the
might
new
be able to
house.
chat. No, I'm not. I've
No,
already,
no
said to-
lights.
I've already made the call. Like we're not having. We'll have a wall scone there.
Stop.
Just
When
one
we
wall scone.
when we build next door, there won't be lights. Like, sorry, we don't even have electricity. It's a
Oh, you
fire
two would be
oven.
so cute if you had 2 houses and then you chopped down the back fence and you just had one connected.
Goals. You can move up to the land. Got
Look,
plenty of space.
I tempted you here.
yeah. Floods and stuff. Not my cup of tea.
All right, we're going to keep chatting, people, but ciao for now.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to the Road to Wisdom podcast. To join the journey, you can follow us on Instagram at theroadtowisdom.podcast and at www.theroadtowisdompodcast.com. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. We look forward to seeing you next week with more juicy content.